Okay. Welcome everyone to the second episode of our knowledge-based podcast series. This time we have with us Shubham Sethi. Shubham is a full-time investor. A lot of you might know him from his YouTube channel, The Logical Investor, wherein he shares a lot of probably some of the best long-form original research on stocks. So welcome, Shubham.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Yes. So before we begin, quick disclosure. Search Capital is a trade name, brand name used by me, Ankush Agrawal. I'm a SEBI registered individual research analyst. Nothing that we say during this podcast should be construed as a recommendation. Kindly read all the disclosure in the description below. Shubham, do you have any form of SEBI registration?
No, I don't have
No,
it.
no.
Yeah,
So Shubham is not SEBI registered. So Shubham, let's start from the very beginning. Like, how did you start in the market? Like, you were an engineer working in the US, so now being a full-time investor. So how this entire transition happened? If you can talk about your journey.
sure. So basically, started in 2012. So soon after college, I had interest in the stock markets. Uh, but I think basically when I started, I what I was doing is along with my job, I was just putting money into like HDFC Bank or like
Okay.
ICICI Bank, all the Nestle, like these kind of like good companies. But I did not understand like research or anything. It was like tukka, you can say. Like,
Hmm.
uh, but so in 2015, my job allowed me to go to the US, and therefore I thought, oh, the tax and all will get complicated. So I sold off everything, and I went to the US, and then soon realized that I shouldn't have sold because these are good quality
Yeah.
companies. And so basically, this got me interested into the market. I started spending more time. But then when I started reading about annual reports, uh, and then I started looking at what other big investors are doing. So I started copying them. Uh,
Okay.
and then I think in 2016, I had a big loss.
Okay.
Right. And so I realized that, I'm definitely doing something very wrong. Luckily, the portfolio size was very small back then, so like it didn't like kind of matter. And the major problem was not that the loss was there. The major problem was I did not have a portfolio allocation strategy. So I was only holding like 4 or 5 stocks, and
Hmm.
like more than 20% allocation was in this stock, and it corrected by like 70%. So one thing, I did not have a portfolio allocation strategy. Second, I did not have a basically stop loss, or what do you like, some mechanism to
Yeah.
protect me. uh, so yeah, basically this got interested me even more, that what I'm doing wrong. I started reading, and then by 2019, I got so interested into the market that I thought I'll leave my job and do it full time.
Okay.
So yeah, so in 2019 I left my job, and yeah, since like almost like 4 or 5 years now, I'm doing it full time.
Right. Right. So then my second question was about that. Like, it's something that I wanted to really understand. Uh, like, how did you make that decision of becoming full time? I mean, obviously, it's a big decision. So, like, what was going on your mind that allowed you to make that decision? Like, was it that your portfolio reached a certain scale wherein you thought that this is the only thing that you want to do now, or was it something else? If you can talk a bit about it.
No, I think it was very planned. So
Okay.
basically, I had initially thought that I'll take a career break someday to do
Hmm.
something I like. And that was like in 2015 itself, I had thought of that. But I think when I got interested into it, there was a point when I used to spend more time into the like researching the companies than I was doing at my job.
Right.
So that was a point where I realized, I think this is what I just want to do full time. And I mean, basically, for whatever 4 years I was there, I was hardcore on saving and just trying to have enough cushion so that when I leave my job, at least I'll have like 2 year kind of a buffer.
Okay.
Uh, but then, I got lucky because soon after COVID happened, and I had like started deploying money from US into India. So at
Okay.
that point of time, when the crash happened, I was 80% in cash.
Wow.
So that was, but even after that, I did not had the courage to deploy it in one go because uh, basically when I was in US, I was mostly researching US companies. I was not spending time into Indian companies, and so uh, this entire market was slightly alien for me in terms of I did not have the breadth at that point of time. Uh,
Yeah,
I knew very few companies well, but I did not know a lot of companies. So, but I think over when I was like full time into this over next 1 2 years, I got to know the entire universe. Okay, what is going on? Where, what are the pockets? And slowly, I started deploying. I think 20 after 2022, I was able to deploy like almost the entire capital.
got it. Got it. Uh, so now it's been around 4 5 years that you have been full time, right?
Yeah.
So what, according to you, are some of the positives and negatives? A lot of people think there are a lot of positives, but I know that equally there are a lot of negatives of being full time as well. So if we
Yeah,
can
yeah.
talk about both the pros and cons about it.
Yeah, yeah, sure. So I think it's more about what interests you. So if it is something that you are like passionate about, interested about, then I don't think there are any major negatives other than people could say, you get socially cut off and those kind of things are definitely there. But for me, that has not happened. Why? Because I started this YouTube channel and all, and so I
Right.
got introduced to a community, and I think now I have more, like-minded friends then because job is a very professional environment, right? So
Yeah.
but here it is more collaborative. It is more like, all of us are trying to, because, uh, you know, people here understand. I think it is a very different industry. It is not
Yeah.
like, if I make money, you lose money. If all of
Yeah.
us
Yeah.
make money, then we all grow together, right? So
Yeah.
that is how
Yeah.
it works, which is a good kind of an industry to be in. Otherwise, in terms of freedom, in terms of time, I think, yeah, that is what I enjoy. So nothing major for me, but if it is something that when you like, for example, you leave a job and you start doing this, but your thought process is that, I will not have to work hard. I will just, enjoy life, and then I will,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, then probably after a few months, you might start thinking that it was not the right decision or something, because ultimately, it is a job where you have to be in a room for 8 hours and read, read, read. That is
Yeah.
how, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So for listeners, I'll just add one thing here. I think the problem that a lot of people make while doing this decision is they think about the outcome that, in the end, you make an end number of money and number of multipliers. But
Mm.
eventually, passion is not the end outcome, but the process. So you have to like the process. A lot of people don't think about equity research ka process, right? Which is very,
Yes.
hard. So you have to read 400 500 pages every day.
Yeah.
So it's very grinding. A lot of people don't think about that process. They just think about the end outcome, and then they want to come into equities, which is
Yes.
not the right way to think about it.
Yes.
Uh,
I think
so yeah,
overall, even for me, if you ask me, I think the goal is not to reach a certain value. It is more around how much can I beat the Nifty, or
yeah,
like
yeah.
it is more, and that is the outcome. I think that is for all the analysts,
Yeah,
for
yeah. I think everyone in the market, beyond the point, it's not about money, it's about the score. Like
yeah, it is about the
most people
score.
will not accept it, but
Yeah.
in the end, it's that the feeling of getting right
Yes.
every now and then
Yeah.
is much more than just the money out. Money is an outcome out of it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, yeah, Shubham. The thing that you pointed on the YouTube, so that is what I wanted to ask. Like, what made you start your YouTube channel? Like, if I talk about myself, when I left my professional role and became full time, it became very monotonous, right?
Mm.
So that's how I started my blog, and that eventually transformed to search now, because it kinds of provides an engagement, to be
Yes.
honest, yeah, which keeps you going. So in your case, what allowed you to make that decision, and what makes you keep doing that?
To be honest, I'm not very active for the last few months, uh,
Yeah.
but I'm going to be active very soon. But anyways, I think the major point was that when I left my job, basically, as everyone would understand, right? Because I did not have a network. So the major goal was
Mm.
to and another thing was, if you see now, there are a lot of good long form content available, right? But I think 4 or 5 years ago, if I search for any stock on
Yeah,
YouTube, the
yeah.
only videos
We
I
were the
would get
probably
was,
early guys in YouTube. Yeah.
Yeah, so the only videos I would get was like technical analysis, this chart, or
Hmm.
some like, very, very shallow analysis who would just talk about, this is what the company does, so it will do well.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So basically, I thought, okay, maybe I can add some value. So I just started putting out videos. The quality of videos was so bad, but even then the response was good. So that encouraged me to, keep going. Uh, and I think ultimately there was something in my mind that maybe, after a few years, if I actually start something, maybe like
Yeah.
after then I at least I'll have some people who know me. That was also obviously one motive, but then I never did that. But uh, yeah, that, and the major thing was networking, which I think it helped a lot.
Got it. Uh, okay, so let's now talk about investing. So Shubham Sethi as an investor 5 years back, like how was he investing? Shubham Sethi as an investor now, like how does he invest now? And what are some of the big changes that have happened and what made you take those changes?
Yeah, yeah. So I think if you compare it, it is the entirely different person, I would say, in terms of the style, the process. So earlier, if you think about it, in the market, right, what is the most famous philosophy is Warren Buffett, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Right. And why? Because he has done really, really well and, very respected. And uh, so anyways, I started by reading Peter Lynch. So I
wow,
was always a Peter Lynch kind of a fan, more than a Buffett fan.
yeah,
Uh, Obviously, I respected him, but it aligned more with me, the Peter Lynch style. So initially, I was okay, like I'll do, high growth stocks. That was the only thing that I was doing. But then over time, I got introduced to other things like special situations, and this happened in the last like 3, 4 years. And then there was a point, when held some stocks, and then, they were all growth stocks, but then it went to like 200p, 300p, and I thought, it became very expensive. I sold out, and then it became a six bagger after I sold out. Right? I got a three bagger, it became a six bagger after that. And then I started questioning that, maybe I'm doing something wrong. Then I started basically realizing that technical analysis also has some value, because these charts were always in momentum, even though, what why not to sell. So basically, if you, so back then I was pure like funda guy. Now I am more like techno funda guy. And the philosophy, how is it has changes. Earlier it was buy and hold, right? It was like
okay,
buy and just hold, because the company ultimately will do well, right? And then you will make
mm,
money. Now it is about CAGR, right? It is about score, right?
yeah,
So now it is like, basically, the what is the biggest advantage as a retail investor? What do I have? That is that I can get in and get out swiftly without any problem, unlike mutual funds or all the
yeah,
like the
yeah,
big guys, right? So now basically it is like the major allocation. So if I have like 20 stories, the major
yeah,
allocation will always be into stories which are running today. Or basically so there is always a trigger like
yeah,
behind a company, right? Why the stock goes up, right? And so the trigger which has just happened, that is where the major allocation, and the trigger which will happen after like 1 year, 2 year, right? They
yeah,
will be like, basically small positions or tracking positions, right? So now I'm become more opportunistic, I would say. Then obviously also in terms of the process, it has changed a lot. Like accumulation, or basically when to sell, I try to combine technicals along with it and see that, for example, if a stock has already given a very good return and it is looking very expensive, like
yeah,
earlier it was pure like value, okay, and it doesn't have value, okay, sell.
yeah, yeah,
Okay, now it is like, oh, why would I sell? It is running. Unless, it breaks the whatever 50 DMA or something like that, right? Any technical breakdown happens, just keep trailing, keep trailing. So I think
mm,
those things have changed a lot. Allocation style has changed a lot. Earlier it was equi-distributed. Now it is more like whatever has started is showing like higher uh, relative strength, the allocation is higher in those stocks. And whatever, even though the story is running is showing lower relative strength, the allocation becomes smaller. Like those are like some small changes that I have done.
Right. So broadly, if I have to sum it up, basically, what you're saying is you're trying to optimize for the portfolio for opportunities that can deliver, say, the best outcome in next 1 year,
Yes.
right? Even if you like something for, say, 2, 3 years out, you're not interested. You'll rather use and time the opportunity when it comes, when the pivot comes in
Yes.
your sense.
Yes, yes. So how I think about it is I'll tell you, I basically think of it in two baskets. One is tactical bets and one is, long-term bets. So
Okay.
long-term bets are some things that will compound like 25% for next 5 years, right?
Okay.
Tactical bets are something that, have some a trigger that makes it very, very good for next 1 year or next 1.5 year or whatever, next 6 months, some very a smaller
Yeah.
duration. But I already know that these are companies that I do not want to keep for long term, right? Because they don't have moat, or it's a commodity type company, or some trigger happened, like an anti-dumping duty happened, because of which it has some kind of a short-term advantage, or it got a big order, for example, right?
Yeah.
Or something like that, or some trigger has happened because of which in the short term it is a good bet, but not for the long term, right? So I would say right now around like half the portfolio is into long-term bets, which I do not churn, which are like good bets. I know they will keep delivering, but this other
Right.
half is more around tactical bets, which like have a very high churn. And yeah, basically every quarter a few things go out, a few things come in, and
Right.
yeah, it keeps
Right.
on, the churn is high.
Right. So, Shubham, on the allocation part, so at an overall level, the long-term part, is it more concentrated, and the tactical part, is it more diversified?
Yes, that is correct. Uh, the long term. So I'm because I'm a Peter Lynch type of a guy,
Yeah.
right? So uh, I have a lot of companies in my portfolio. At any point of time, I would have 40 to 50 stocks,
Oh, wow.
uh, because I follow a lot of stories, and I personally I embrace it. I do not think that it is anything that I should have to justify, because I know the story of all of them. If you ask me what is going on, but then within those 40 to 50 stocks, there would be like 20 to 30 stocks which have like point 1, point 2, point 5 per
Yeah,
like
it's a
smaller
long tail
allocation
just for the tracking purpose, right?
for the tracking purpose, yeah. But these 20 stocks, out of those 20 stocks, like I would say 12 to 15 stocks are where, these are long-term kind of a bets.
Yeah.
And then another 15 stocks, these get churned out quickly and get churned in. So that is how I would think it would be.
So, what would be the highest concentration, say,
Yeah,
on
yeah, yeah.
the
So
long-term side and on
concentration,
the tactical side?
yeah, yeah. So long-term side, the concentration became higher not because I allocated high, but because over time they have grown and I still feel
Yeah.
they are good. Uh, in terms of maximum allocation, I go to is 20%. I do
Okay.
not go beyond 20. And some of them are like 15%, 12% now, these long-term ones. But even in tactical bets, right? So if you know that there is a high degree of certainty. So to be very honest, over time, I've realized there is higher alpha in tactical bets than there is in long-term bets.
Yeah,
Right?
always.
Right. So if I find something very juicy for the next 1 year or next 6 months, for example, these also come from special situations. So for example, sometimes a demerger is happening, and the date is very close, and after demerger, whatever this will happen, or something got a big order, something like that.
Yeah.
Then I take that allocation, even though it is tactical, I take it up to 15-20% sometimes. But these are rare events. They do not
Yeah.
happen very often. Generally, they would be like 4%, 3% kind of bets.
Got it. Got it. So, how does the screening work for you, Shubham? Because I mean, on the tactical side, you'll need to churn quite a lot. So you need a fresh stream of ideas every now and then.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
screening would be a very important aspect, at least for the tactical part of it, right?
Yes, that is true. So I do every day, I look at all the all the open offers, delisting, everything. So every
Yeah.
night it has become a routine now for last few years. And every night I go through all the major announcements. For example, any special situation, any big orders, any buybacks, any, open offers, stuff like that. And then also, sometimes these are, just news-based things. So, for example, I'll tell you a very recent example. So, one thing is I'm still invested. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
not an advice, or I'm not a registered advisor, anyways. So, for example, very recently, I don't know if you saw in March, April, there was a lot of buzz around the heat wave,
Hmm.
right? So, heat wave. So, basically, there was one thing was clear. So I was looking at a lot of articles which said that in Bangalore, this is the last 30 years or 50 years, highest temperature. Same
Yeah.
news came for Kolkata. In Delhi, all of my friends were complaining that, it's very hot, right?
Yeah.
I realized that this year the heat wave is very strong. But unlike last year, where also I was tracking a lot of these companies, last year the monsoon was very erratic, right? So
Yeah.
basically, what happened was every now and then there was, rains, and so every time people thought of buying a AC or a cooler, it would
Yeah.
rain, and people would think, even though
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
temperature was high, but people
Yeah.
the sales of all these AC companies was, I think, in 4 or 5 years, one of the worst.
Was. Yeah.
Okay, so what I understood that okay, there may be an opportunity, a tactical opportunity in maybe AC companies. Then I initiated a position, small position, like tracking position.
Okay.
Uh, then Voltas came up with an announcement saying that we have sold 2 million ACs or in lifetime.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
update, right? So I
Yeah.
realized that, okay, either to, matlab, there is a lot of tailwind. Then there was an interview by Blue Star who also said that,
Yeah.
this is going to be a very good summer. We are
Yeah.
targeting, I think, whatever, 40-50% growth, something
50%.
like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Right? So I picked PG Electroplast out of it, right?
Yeah.
Because I thought I don't know if Blue Star will win or whatever
Mm.
Daikin will win, but I think they make ACs for almost all of them, so they should do
Yeah.
well. It was available at a reasonable valuation, and yeah, so that just talking about the screening. So that is one way of
Yeah.
screening. So I was able to put a decent bet for a short term, like
Right.
whatever 6 months or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. So that would be one aspect of it, right? But do you run screens and how much is network helps
Yeah,
in
yeah,
getting ideas? I mean, that's very lost. I mean, that is something that is huge,
yeah.
but is a lot less talked about.
Yes. So I think network helps a lot. I would say, like, even after I screen all these things, I think more than 60-70% of the ideas come from the network. Uh,
Okay.
and that is because obviously I cannot spend my time reading everything. But I think more than network, I think over time you build trust over people, right? I think
Yeah.
that is also very important. So even though I might talk to like 20 people, there are 5 people who I have known for last several years, and I know that when he's saying something or she's saying something,
Yeah.
right, I have to give the maximum weight. I need to leave everything and start reading about it,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, I think that is definitely a very important aspect.
Got it. Got it. So Shubham, according to you, what's the best setup for a multi-bagger? And also at the same time, what's a setup that is, ripe for a disaster? Like, what are the characteristics that you think results in the biggest winners
Yeah,
and on the opposite end as well?
yeah. So I think for a multi-bagger, I think there are three things that I feel are most important. One is obviously neglect, that, several years of neglect. The
Like,
valuation should be really, really cheap and no one should be interested, right? That is obviously the first thing. And that does not happen in a bull market, right? Most often, right? But the second thing is a surprise element to it, right? Because there is a neglect and nobody is interested. When there is a slight surprise, right, the they not just revert to mean, they basically go above the mean. And then, there
yeah,
should be a favorable government policy or some event happened, something, basically something happened in some other country, a war started, something like, for example, I'll give you an
yeah,
example of a stock in my portfolio. Zen Technology, right?
Yeah.
So basically, it's a defense company. The revenues are very erratic because these are,
Yeah.
tender based orders, and
Yeah.
they get some years, they don't get some years, and then the valuations were really cheap initially. And then I'll tell you a real story. In fact, this happened, I think, when Zen Technology was around 600. Okay, somebody
Okay.
pinged me and asked me, can you suggest a stock? I said, please read Zen Technology. Okay. And then even then, Zen Technology was, I think, whatever, more than 100 P, whatever, 100, 150 P,
Yeah.
something like that. I don't remember the
Yeah.
exact value. But when you have read the con calls, the management already had a good order book. And basically, the revenues at that time, I think, was around 150, 200 CR, right?
Mm.
And the management quoted in the con call that in by 2027, 28, if I don't go to 5,000 CR, I will be disappointed, right? A 200 crore
Yeah.
company saying 5,000 CR in 27, right? And anyways, he had an order book of 1,500 CR, which he was supposed
Yeah.
to execute in next 2 years, right? But when you basically had, baked in all those things, the valuation was okay. It was slightly expensive. I would say maybe like 30, 40 PE forward earning, but it was not like what 150 or 200 that was
Yeah.
showing on screener, right? And even at that point of time, even though the story, it was already a three bagger. From 200, the stock had already went to 600, 650.
Yeah.
But when you told people at 650, everyone was, kind of was not approving. And
Yeah.
everyone was saying it is very expensive. It is very expensive, right? The orders kept coming. Now the stock is what, 1600. I
Yeah.
don't know. The story might play. It's still a kind of a government-led thing. So if the
Yeah.
anything happens around there, it might not, it might fizzle out very quickly. But I think these are stories that end up becoming, kind of multi-X. Also, one pattern that I've observed that has worked really good for me is surprise earnings. So basically, any kind of a surprise when, a lot of times these companies have very bad numbers. Any screen would not be able
Yeah.
to filter
Never.
these
Yeah.
companies, right? Uh, and then, for example, a 10 CR company suddenly showing a profit of 25 CR, 30 CR, right?
Yeah.
Right. The market will give them an initial thing like 30, 40% in the first few days.
Yeah.
But then most of the times when you go and read about it, these are not 1 quarter, 2 quarter story. They
Yeah.
end up
It's just a big
becoming,
take of it.
it's just a beginning of it, right? And most people get confused that, oh, it's already up like 50%. I do not want to
Yeah.
invest. But if you go and do the research, they end up becoming 3x, 4x a few times. And those are the ones that you have to catch.
Yeah. I think one point that you made very interesting was like the relevance of high PE that leads people to avoid a stock. I mean, an equally relevant factor is also that how much the stock has done in recent, say, 6 months, right? If it has
Yes.
gone up 2, 3x, a lot of people just don't want to buy.
Don't want to read about it.
Yeah,
Don't
yeah,
want to
yeah.
read
I
about
mean,
it.
yeah, that it's as equal relevant as the high valuation that PE might people will see on screen and avoid or something.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's very true. That's very true, actually. Shubham, similarly, on what stock do you think, like the setup that you believe should be avoided at all costs? Like, I mean, based on your experience, for the most part, these kind of bets never work out.
Yes. So I don't know, they never work out, but I personally have burnt my hands mostly in. So if you categorize the stocks, right, there are like, I'm basically categorizing what Peter Lynch does, right?
Yeah,
So high growth stocks, cyclical stocks, then you have basically turnaround bets,
turnaround, yeah,
right? And then you have like stalwarts, which is the medium growing stocks,
medium growth, yeah,
right? Broadly, like these 4 or 5 categories. But I think for me, the worst ones have been turnarounds, right? So the hope that it will work out, right?
yeah,
And even though fundamentally things are changing, right? The volatility in turnarounds is so huge, like they will become double, and then within months you will lose all your gains, or you will be like
yeah,
in 30,
yeah,
40% loss. The ability, like, and I don't know, it depends on person to person. So for example, people might still be able to do it, and good, like, respect to them. But for me, I think for me, what is easiest to hold on is where the thesis is working and the stock is running.
yeah,
Like the stock is going up, the fundamental thesis is going as expected, then I can keep on averaging up, and I know that what is things feel in control, right?
Yeah.
It is going
Yeah.
as per the plan, right? Whereas there are certain bets where, things are going as per plan, but stock is going down, right?
Yeah.
Earlier, and that is what you in the initial question, right? What has changed since then for me? Earlier, the plan was to hold on. I know it will change. It will
Yeah.
actually turn around, and it will,
Yeah. Yeah.
ultimately you will make a multi-bagger, right? And in a matter of time, in few months, the stock goes down 40, 50, 60%. Then to recoup that 40, 50% becomes so hard that, you then need like multi-x returns, right?
Yeah.
And then even if it plays out, right, it is then very hard to, justify the long wait that you did, right?
Yeah.
But now what I have realized is, turnarounds until they actually turn around, right? For example, I'll tell
Yeah.
you, I played Suzlon,
Hmm.
right? E- And I was happy to buy it at 20 than to say at 7 rupees, that Suzlon will turn around, right?
Yeah.
Or I actually played Inox Wind. Suzlon I traded, but Inox Wind I actually traded. And uh, basically, when the orders were there, the policy support was there, everything was there. So now, I mean, my biggest learning was that if you are playing turnarounds, don't go for the first 100% return. That
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
the that
Absolutely.
is the hardest to get. And those,
Yeah.
like, people who are actually connected in the industry, those are the ones who will be able to actually, time that. Then yeah, and most of my losses have actually happened in turnarounds. So that is what I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense. I think the easier way to play it around is wait for that first spot. Even if you end up buying
Yes.
50% higher, it makes a lot of sense for
Yes.
the cost and the opportunity cost that is there trying to wait for it.
Yes. Yes.
Got it. Got it. So Shubham, as a full-time investor, what is a typical day like? Like a day or a week like? Do you have specific time reserved for certain areas of investing? So I'll tell you the background for asking this. Like for me, like Saturdays is one day where I don't do stock research because since the market is not there, you don't have distraction. So it's a very good time to do more on the thinking about, right?
Yes.
Portfolio and
Very
uh,
true.
frameworks and all that stuff. Similarly,
Mm.
on screening, earlier I never used to have a separate time for screening.
Mm.
But now, once I've started putting a separate day for screening, the outcome is huge because once you put dedicated efforts to it, I mean, you get a lot of it out of it. So, do you have, how do you do it?
Yes, I'll tell you how I do it. So basically, my day, for example, one day before in the night, I would have screened and I would have a few ideas, right?
Okay.
So basically, what happens is some of the ideas are very pressing. That because I do a lot of tactical things also,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you don't do it in next 1 or 2 days, it will be
Yeah.
gone,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It will be gone.
It's now or
So
never.
it's now or never kind of most, and it happens a lot with me these days. It's because and it won't happen every day. Like for example, like once in like 2 3 weeks, there will be some announcement or something that you got your hands on, and over time these are patterns, right? You are able to understand that this pattern is something that has a very very high probability of working out. So for example, I'll give you
Mm.
an example that I looked at 2 days ago, and I don't own it
Okay.
yet. I'm still researching. So there is a company called Hubtown. Okay,
Yeah.
right? It's a real estate player from
Yeah.
Maharashtra, has a
Maharashtra.
lot of land and all, right?
Yeah.
So it came to my radar like 2 days ago. Okay, and why it came on my radar? Because I have a screen which basically was showing me that the stock has given whatever 50 60% return in the last 1 month. I'll also look at
Okay.
things which are running and
Well,
try to find out, okay, what is going on?
what is
Why are
happening? Yeah.
what is happening, right? And then I just did my like first 5 minutes of thing, and then I realized that the stock went from, I think, 10 rupees, 20 rupees, I don't know, very small, like 8 10 rupees to 200 rupees in the last whatever 1.5 years. And at 220 rupees a share, the promoter basically has given warrants to himself.
Okay.
Okay, and he's putting his own money. Okay, so which basically got me even more interested that, okay, at this price, after a 10 15x, now the promoter is putting his own money. I
Yeah.
started reading about it and I realized that, it is this is a company that has like a crazy amount of land in Mumbai, which is like sea facing.
Yeah.
Okay, and when I started researching, I researched that a lot of these pharma giants booked houses for 50, 60 crores. Like these are luxury apartments, right?
Yeah.
Into these projects. And these are all under construction projects. And they were, and because this guy had defaulted on payments in the last
Yeah. Last
cycle
cycle. Yeah.
and all that,
Very
some
bad name for
very
the
bad
stock.
name. Yes, very bad name. So neglect was there. People did not believe, and I'm not owning the stock, but I'm just talking about the screening process. So
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
example, now my next 1 2 days are booked, right?
Yeah.
Because I just want to figure out, okay, why is this, what is happening actually? What is the opportunity size and all
Yeah.
that, right? And so my day is typically very, very flexible. Uh, uh, if I don't have any pressing names, for example, right,
Yeah.
then it would be more around, uh, you know, uh, I spend like I will talk to just call people,
Yeah.
just talking to them.
Okay. Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
basically, I would try to automate a few things. So, for example, a lot of these things are very manual. You have to check a lot of these websites. I would just
Yeah.
like write a scraper to scrape a few things, put it in my
Yeah.
dashboard. So, or these kind of things. Uh, yeah, and if I have nothing else to do, then I'm a bottom up investor. I'm not
Yeah.
a top down investor. I generally start from the bottom. Something is happening, and then I try to go
Yeah.
up. If there is nothing, then I would just start looking at a sector analysis, for example, from SOIC or from like Tarek or some YouTube video, like or some industry thing. That it is
Yeah.
very, very flexible. It is not a at this time I do this. It's not like that for me.
Yeah. So, Shubham, one thing really wanted to ask, since you have two different buckets in your portfolio, uh, what I have observed personally as well is that when you have different buckets, to an extent, it becomes challenging because you have to give different thought process
Yes.
from the entirety, from screening to thesis to selling and everything, to
Yes.
these different buckets, which uh, personally I have sort of in the past felt that doing it has been difficult. Like a lot of people say that, they'll do trading and they'll do investing, but that never happens
Mm.
because if you start doing trading, uh, you
Mind
will never
become.
be able to read 400 pages. That never happens. It's not that easy. So
Yes.
similarly, working with two different approaches, a lot of times it becomes slightly difficult to manage both of this, wherein a short-term approach might mingle in the decision making of a long-term approach, which you ideally don't want.
Yeah.
So have you faced those challenges in the past, and how do you try to put it separate the both the buckets?
Yeah. Yeah. That
Because
is
another thing that I will add is given that on the tactical bucket you might be making a lot of returns, so that might creep in a thought that why am I holding say 50% into long term? Let me make it 70% tactical, right? That
to,
might also happen.
to be very honest, it started with 90/10 and now it is 50/50. So
Oh,
so whatever you are saying is true, but uh, ultimately, I absolutely agree with you. Uh, so for example, I'll give you a recent example. So for example, it happened with me in Deepak Fertilizer. So Deepak
okay.
Fertilizer 2 quarters back was something that I thought was very juicy as a cyclical investment, right? Because they had put up a big ammonia plant and the largest in India, and they would
Yeah,
basically, but the position size was small. I so basically, how I think about it is, and actually, even in the long term bets, right? I
yeah,
now think about it. For example, company that I have to buy for a long term, right? I think about it in 3 phases now. So you're absolutely right, and I actually try to blend a little bit. And that happened very recently, like last 1 year. So I think about it in like 3 buckets. So for example, a buying zone, holding zone, and selling zone, right? So
okay.
basically, I look at technical analysis even for long-term investments in the buying and selling zones.
Hmm.
But I do not look at technical analysis in the hold zone. So for example, Uh, so I absolutely agree. It does get creeped in, but then I think it's more about practice that these are stocks I
Yeah,
do not have to touch, and these are companies that will keep on doing well. And it actually happens a lot with the margin of safety as well, which I would want to point out. So something that you are on 10-20% profit, right? Versus
yeah,
something that you are at 300% gains, right?
yeah,
If you are at 300% gains and the company is still doing very well, right? Even if it goes down by like 20-30%, I do not want to touch it because the margin of safety is so high that this position will, it's more like, yeah, you either win like X or you win 1.5x or whatever, like
yeah,
something like
yeah,
that, right? So yeah, I agree. But I think margin of safety plays a huge role according to me.
yeah. Psychologically, it helps a lot to hold. Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Uh, Now, Shum, can you talk about selling, especially on the tactical side, given that these are more, time-specific bets wherein, even a week or month later might uh, end up in a situation wherein the bet that work didn't end up making you any returns.
Yes.
So on that part of the bucket, how do you look at selling?
Yes. So I'll tell you, basically, whenever you buy or whenever I buy, I basically have something in mind that what is my expectation, right?
Mm,
A lot of times it might be like 25% with a high certainty, right? And I'm
okay.
happy to play those as well. For example, maybe like 25% in a month with high certainty. Or
Yeah.
it could be the other way around. It could be like 100% in 1 year or 2 years, right? So
Mm,
basically, selling comes by having a frame of, thought before you actually buy. That is
okay.
one thing. The second thing is then in these tactical events, there would be a reason to buy. So, for
Yeah.
example, if I am buying because, for example, in 6 months the numbers would be bumper, right?
Yeah.
Then I basically will hold for 6 months, and even if the stock ends up becoming a multi-bagger after that or keeps on going, I
Yeah.
I would not be too much, concerned, or I'm happy. I
Yeah.
don't, it's okay, yaar. I don't want to make all the money, but
Right.
whatever
Yeah.
I'm playing for, I just want to make my share of money and I'm happy, right? And all these tactical bets, the technicals play, I give slightly higher weightage to technicals than fundamentals. So, for example, uh, I have a clear rule which says that don't lose big money in a big position, right? Because in the
Yeah.
past, that is what happened to
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
right?
And it hurts substantially.
It had substantially, right? So basically, what will happen is even in these tactical bets. So, for example, if the position size is 1%, I don't care, right? Yeah, it goes down by 20%, it would
Yeah.
not hurt me, right? Versus a
Yeah.
position size of 15% I have made, right? But then the position is not playing out as expected, right?
Yeah.
I will never let it go in 30-40% loss, right? Then I will be like, yeah, 5-10% का loss हो रहा है, book करो. I'll buy
Uh-huh.
it back again, right? I'll buy
Yeah.
it back again, right? I don't have such a big portfolio, I cannot buy it back, right? So basically, in these tactical bets, if the position is not going in my favor, they will get churned out very quickly. And yeah, that is how I think about selling in these. So either an event specific thing or
Yeah.
or basically, technicals.
So broadly, what you're saying is, when you're buying, you already have a predetermined, say, an event or an outcome, say, in terms of a certain level of returns that you believe should be there. And once you have it, you're, for the most part, you're ready to take that amount and let it go. You're
Yes,
not
but I
ready
would
to
not take it immediately. Then I would start trailing it.
trailing. Yeah, or even if something changes, you might rethink the next level, what might be there, but you're not worried about, it might go up much higher.
Yes, yes, yes.
You're
Because I did
comfortable
not.
with taking.
Yes, I did
Yeah,
not
yeah,
come there to expect like huge returns or multi-bagger
yeah,
returns. I came,
yeah,
it was a tactical bet for me, so it should be
yeah,
respected like a tactical bet and not like
yeah,
any other
yeah,
long-term
yeah,
stock in my portfolio.
yeah, yeah. I mean that's an important discipline about selling. Like a lot of people just go in the flow. क्या चल रहा है तो चलने दो,
हाँ,
right?
नहीं चल रहा है
And
तो
do
चलने दो, लेकिन I think even for long-term investment. So I think I heard an interview where someone was talking about Radha Krishna Damani,
mm,
and somebody asked him, he used to do both trading and investing.
yeah, yeah,
So somebody asked Radhakrishnan Damani that, how do you do both these things together? I think the same
yeah,
question that you asked
yeah,
me. So he said, बहुत simple है. अगर कोई लॉन्ग टर्म इन्वेस्टमेंट है, राइट, और
Hmm.
मानो कि वो सेल जोन में आ गया है, तो उसको मेंटली अपने लॉन्ग टर्म बकेट से उठा के ट्रेडिंग बकेट में डाल देने का. That is what he actually
Okay.
said, right? And that is what,
Really?
and yeah, that is what he said.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Makes
and
sense actually.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
right. And basically, jab I heard that interview, right, I thought, oh, I do the same thing. So
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
long term investing, if something goes in my sell zone, I basically
Yeah.
start thinking of it like a trade, that at
Trade.
this point I would basically, start trailing it, and I would not
Yeah.
let it, I don't want to give up my losses, but as long it is going up, जाने दो भाई, जब तक जा रहा है जाने
Yeah.
दो, but जहाँ stop loss hit हुआ
Yeah.
काट के निकल जाओ.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a very interesting insight actually. That once it reaches a certain fundamental level, make it as a technical bet
Yes.
and then ride it. Yeah. Very interesting actually. That was very important. Shubham, in your past experience, can you talk about one big winner and one big loser and the entire journey? Like, how did you discover that stock? What you liked about it and what made you buy it? How the thesis played out or didn't play out, and what made you sell it? And eventually, if there was a big learning out of the outcome that you have.
Yeah, yeah, sure. So, to be very honest, so big winners in recent times, I would say Inox Wind was one. Even though in terms of percentage, it was not a crazy winner like some of my other names have been, but because the allocation was big, right, the
Yeah,
impact
yeah,
that it had on my portfolio was really, really big,
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
right? So I basically, I'll just go through the journey. So it started by a phone call that I talked to, I don't know if you know, Amey Kulkarni sir. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right? You would know
Yeah,
him.
he tracks the regulated sectors very
Yes.
well. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I called him up and he talked to me about Inox Wind. That okay, some these things are happening. Over time, matlab, I had basically had a huge respect for him. Matlab, past maybe because of his blogs and all. So and he basically has a concentrated portfolio. So in terms of weightage, when he's saying something has a very higher
yeah,
weightage versus somebody
yeah,
who has 50 stocks in his portfolio and
yeah,
he's
absolutely.
saying something, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So I started looking at it. I understood भाई कि ये तो पिछले 4-5 साल से so in 2015 actually, sorry, I think even before that in 20, yeah, 50, so if you look at when the Inox Wind IPO came, right,
mm,
before that the basically the sector was in like cost plus kind of a, because it was a new sector, right? So the
yeah,
government
yeah,
wanted to encourage it. They were like, भाई सब लोग पैसा
yeah,
बनाओ, and then
uh,
whatever is the cost, we'll give you some margin, and you basically sell your sell your basically the wind turbines, right? In 2015 or 16, I do not remember the exact year, the
15
government,
that reverse auction game. Yeah,
yes, the auction came, right?
yeah,
And so all these companies started making losses because the competition increased, and then the tendering stopped. The tendering
yeah,
came to a halt because of all that, right? Uh, and basically, what I'm trying to say is 2015 to 2020, there was neglect,
yeah,
right? The stocks
yeah,
were like nobody wanted to touch them. They were like hated
yeah,
stocks, right? And then the government, the policy again changed, right? From that, they
yeah,
basically the reverse auction went away,
yeah,
and then a lot of tenders started coming in. The government focus again went into wind
yeah,
energy, and basically the starting point was good. And he told me about that stock. The stock was around 120 or 130, something like that. I started buying it at 150, right? But then a lot of these interviews came from the management saying that,
mm,
it's a very nice cycle. I read about Suzlon, they were saying the same
yeah,
things. Orders started trickling in. So basically, as I was saying, neglect, then the government, tailwinds,
yeah, yeah,
then the visibility, because they started getting orders. And then uh, I think, so how I think about it is that here, either things are improving or things are going towards the worse,
yes,
right? And what I have realized over time is कि भाई हम, as a fundamental investor, I used to do absolute valuation कि भाई this is the
yeah, yeah,
valuation,
yeah.
right?
Never works, never
That
works.
does not work. That does not work. So market is efficient, and then so I'll tell you a real example. So earlier, what I used to have was like a alerts. If the stock price hits this level, give me an alert, and I will buy at that time. right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then it either bhai, it would never hit,
Yeah, never.
right? और it, if it actually hit, right, वो स्टॉक नीचे ही गिरता जाएगा क्योंकि
नीचे
एक्चुअली
गिरना
में
है.
कुछ
Yeah,
खराब ही हो गया है भाई, वो गिरता
yeah,
ही
yeah,
जाएगा, राइट? सो
yeah,
व्हाट आई रियलाइज्ड इज कि भाई यू नेवर प्ले ऑन द एब्सोल्यूट नंबर, ऑलवेज प्ले ऑन द ट्रेजेक्टरी, कि भाई
yeah,
अच्छा हो रहा है या बुरा हो रहा है, सिम कीप इट सिंपल, राइट? तो आई रियलाइज कि भाई इनके तो नेक्स्ट 2 साल अच्छे होने वाले हैं, राइट? एंड देन ओवर टाइम ऑर्डर विजिबिलिटी आता गया, वो सब आ गया, सर्टेनिटी हो गया, तो फिर आई ओवर टाइम मतलब वो 5% से शुरू कर करके मतलब आई वॉज एबल टू टेक इट टू लाइक 16-17% ऑफ द पोर्टफोलियो।
wow,
एंड या एंड दैट हैपेंड ग्रेजुअली, सो 150 से 200 के बीच में बाइंग करा, एंड देन वो आई थिंक अब शायद 600 और समथिंग, सिक्स अब तो नहीं, आई आई सोल्ड आउट एक्चुअली, बट नाउ आई
yeah,
थिंक आई, तो बेसिकली अराउंड 600 इश आई वाज लाइक कि भाई अभी वैल्यू जो भी होना था वो
yeah,
प्राइस्ड इन हो गया है काइंड ऑफ। तो
yeah,
बीच में वो झटके लगे थोड़े क्योंकि नाउ इट इज बिकम वेरी वॉलेटाइल,
yeah,
एंड
yeah,
देन वो मतलब टेक्निकल में एग्जिट हो गया, एंड देन आई, एंड एट दिस पॉइंट आई डोंट वांट टू गेट इन बैक, आई एम ओके भाई, अब यहाँ से वो 2x 3x हो जाए, आई डोंट केयर भाई, मेरा जो बनना
yeah,
था मेरा बन गया। एंड आई वांट टू बाय समथिंग दैट जो मुझे सस्ता लग रहा है, दैट इज द फर्स्ट एस्पेक्ट, कि भाई
yeah,
सस्ता
yeah,
लग रहा है, देन द थिंग्स आर इम्प्रूविंग। Same thing happened with CDSL, for example, during COVID. So CDSL was
yeah,
one stock that, I started looking at because during COVID I was like भाई इस टाइम पे क्या है जिसमें अच्छा हो सकता है, and that was I,
yeah,
these are all public numbers published
yeah,
on
yeah,
the
daily updates,
website,
yeah,
yeah, daily basis, so you could actually go and check that what is the number of trades
yeah,
happening, what is the, and the volume was growing, everything was growing. So during COVID, that was a bet that I took, but the allocation was not that meaningful. So even though in percentage terms it was like a 7-8x, absolute terms it was not a very meaningful bet for me. Uh, so that was a few examples where, good bets. So for example, if you talk about me about bad bets, they happen all the
yeah.
time. It is not,
One big that was significant in terms of learning, and
yeah,
wherein
yeah,
you
yeah, yeah.
realize
So
that this is something
so
should not be
I,
done.
I would not have recent bets is what I'm trying to say,
Yeah,
because
yeah, past
now,
example.
आई वो छोटा लॉस मेरा बहुत जल्दी एग्जिट हो जाता है, मतलब वो
Yeah.
बड़ा लॉस आई, मतलब वो पॉलिसी हो गया है कि बड़ा लॉस
Oh,
नहीं
yeah.
बनने
नहीं
बनने
होना.
नहीं देना है। सो वन एग्जांपल आई विल गिव यू, देयर वाज अ स्टॉक कॉल्ड इनोवेटर फसाड, वेरी वेरी
Early SME cycle, right?
अर्ली एसएमई साइकिल, यस करेक्ट। सो अर्ली एसएमई साइकिल में, सो दिस वाज अ basically a EPC company who used to do the glass facade, मतलब वो बिल्डिंग के ऊपर जो
Yeah,
कांच
yeah,
का,
yeah,
to
yeah,
put the glass
yeah,
and all, right? So this was a time when I used to copy, big investors.
yeah.
So this was a Vijay Kedia stock. I listened to the interviews, I listened to the story, and वो मतलब चमक गया मुझे लगा। So the thesis was कि भाई मुंबई का अभी कोई खास स्काईलाइन नहीं है, द बिग बिल्डिंग्स विल कम, उन पे फसाड।
कैपेसाइड स्टोरी मुंबई को न्यूयॉर्क बना देगा.
यस 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 यस, एग्जैक्टली दैट वन। सो बेसिकली तो वो सोच करके खरीद लिया, और वो इतना अकल नहीं था कि भाई एसएमई साइकिल कैसे चलती है, जब पिटाई होती है तो कैसी
Yeah, yeah.
पिटाई होती है, राइट? तो आई थिंक दैट वाज अ स्टॉक जहाँ पे आई बेसिकली लॉस, मतलब 50-60% तो गया होगा, शायद शायद 70 गया हो, मुझे याद नहीं है, बट मतलब पोजीशन उतना बड़ा नहीं था कि बहुत ऐसे मेजर इम्पैक्ट आए, लेकिन
हाँ.
परसेंटेज में बहुत बुरा हाल हुआ था, मतलब आई थिंक 70% तो चला गया था। एंड देन आई सोल्ड एट द वर्स्ट टाइम, आई सोल्ड ड्यूरिंग कोविड, कि भाई
Yeah, that's why it is the most memorable.
या बिकॉज
Yeah,
मुझे
yeah,
लगा कि अब तो इनका और ही बुरा हाल होने वाला है, तो आई वाज लाइक बेचो जो भी है और निकालो।
yeah, yeah, makes sense. Okay. So, Shubham, last question that I wanted to ask was that do you feel as a full-time investor there's a downside purely from a returns perspective? And I'll tell you the background for asking this question. So a lot of times I've seen that as soon as people turn full-time investors or move into professional journey, the returns that they used to make uh, and the returns that they make now are substantially lower, right? Uh, for the very long time, I never could figure out why it happens. But sometime back in one of the podcasts, Anupam Mittal of Shaadi.com, he gave a very good, interesting insight. So what he said was Steve Jobs always used to stay hungry, stay foolish. He never said stay hungry, stay smart. And why is that? So he said that the reason being is if you're smart, you're able to look at the risk and downsides more clearly, and thus smart people always optimize for the downside.
Hmm.
Whereas to get exponential success, you need to optimize for the upside,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So which sort of explains to an extent that once you move full time, you're able to look at risk more clearly and you become much more risk averse, which is why your returns might take a hit.
Yes.
This also explains one of the reason why in the roaring bull market, like what we are in now, retail part-time investors might end up doing much better than professional investors purely because they are taking risk, and in the market we are ready. In this kind of market, you get paid to take risk at least in the short term,
बिल्कुल.
and professionals and full-time investors might not be willing to take that risk or would know that risk much better to optimize for it. So what is
100%.
your thought? Like, have you seen that play out for you or any observation if you can share?
Yes. Yes. So basically, I'll tell you. So for me, the strategy, I'm not a very, I don't know, like there are people who have a very strong philosophy, right? And
Yeah, yeah,
it's obviously a good thing. It saves them from bad things, right? Uh, for me, I am more of a person who wants to know why is something going up. And I
yeah,
don't care as long that it is a good investment, it is a good company, or like that, something like that, right? So for example, there would be people who would say यार बहुत खराब प्रमोटर है, इसका स्टॉक चाहे कितना भी सस्ता हो जाएगा, कुछ भी टेलविंड आएगा, छूना ही नहीं है,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah,
I
yeah,
would never touch it, right? That is not the case with me. So for me, I try to say कि भाई will this stock go up, how much can it go up, and obviously, and then I over time have realized, and then trying to basically I'm someone who will try to reverse engineer that ki bhai, in the market there are these 10 types of things that go up, right? And
right,
or for different reasons. Sometimes it is just because of low float, sometimes
yeah,
it is because of XYZ, right? And then there are things which are very hard to play कि भाई ये मेरे कंट्रोल में नहीं है, वो ऑपरेटेड है, वो उसको मैं कुछ नहीं कर
yeah,
सकता,
yeah,
right? And then there are things that will work, right? Because in the past they have shown very, very good, for example, warrant issues, right?
yeah,
Very, very high success rate. Look at any past data, any company where the promoter is issuing क्योंकि वो यार अपना स्टेक लगा रहा है,
mm,
right? So uh, I think over time, I'll tell you what people say is as your portfolio goes up or as you become full-time investor, your risk-taking ability kind of reduces.
yeah,
For
yeah,
me, for me, the opposite has happened. For me, exactly opposite has happened. I was, in terms of like philosophy, I was constrained, but now my philosophy has become, I don't know, I would say because of all these tactical bets and all these
yeah,
things, right? मुझे ये so when you have a process which says कि भाई you cannot take a when you cannot have a big loss on a big position, right?
yeah,
Then you are willing to take bigger risk because you know that the downside is very limited, right? So for
yeah,
example, a bad company, I know, I think, and that comes by categorizing upfront कि भाई ये जो कंपनी है ना ये इस कैटेगरी में फॉल करती है, राइट? दीज आर कंपाउंडर्स, राइट? दीज
yeah,
आर कंपनीज विच आर वेरी वेरी मतलब अब मतलब I'll give you a real example. मतलब for example, I don't know if I should. So there's a company called VA Tech Wabag, right? If you
yeah,
look at
yeah, yeah,
if you look at their history, it's not very good, right? Uh, so somebody could have just said कि भाई it's not a good company and I would never touch it, which is a perfectly good
yeah,
thing, right? But I said कि भाई this theme is going on, ये सबसे सस्ता available and charts are
yeah,
in my
yeah,
favor,
yeah,
right? So basically I said okay, I will trade it. I अगर यहाँ पे मेरा hit होगा तो I'll just get out. So I think yeah, when you that is what I would say, and I totally agree. Even right now, so in this SME bull market, right? वो मैं
yeah,
टच ही नहीं कर पाया, मतलब आई कुड नॉट एंड आई डिड नॉट हैव द करेज टू बेसिकली डू एनीथिंग, क्योंकि वहां पे यार द व्हाट इज द डाउन साइड, वहां पे अगर मैं फंस गया तो वो लोअर सर्किट लगे, देर इज नो
yeah,
एग्जिट, राइट?
yeah,
देर इज इट्स अ वन वे डोर कि भाई आप
yeah,
अंदर जा सकते हो, आप बाहर नहीं आ सकते,
yeah,
राइट? क्योंकि आई हैव सीन द लास्ट एसएमई साइकिल, कि
Yeah.
आप महीनों तक वेट कर रहे हो, आपको एग्जिट ही नहीं मिल रहा है, आप
Yeah.
रोज ऑर्डर सुबह उठ के ऑर्डर लगा रहे हो, एग्जिट ही नहीं मिल रहा है, रोज सुबह उठ
Yeah.
के ऑर्डर लगा रहे हो, राइट? सो या आई थिंक, बट सबसे ज्यादा पैसा एसएमई में बना है। आई नो
Yeah.
पीपल
Yeah.
जिनके
Absolutely.
पोर्टफोलियो पता नहीं कितने कितने गुना हो गए भाई एसएमई में लगा लगा के।
Yeah. Yeah.
सो
Yeah. That's anotर part. I mean, if you have past car in certain sector or style of company,
या,
it becomes impossible to do it in the next cycle, right?
यस,
Like, I mean, one of the reasons why a lot of people never bought PSU, railways and defense, because 17-18 में भी same story बना था, right? सबने बोला रेलवे का ऑर्डर आएगा, डिफेंस का ऑर्डर आएगा, but nothing happened,
नथिंग हैपेंड,
which
नथिंग।
is why a lot of professional guys never, because they've seen that cycle. Whereas someone who has not seen that and not burned their money in
यस।
that, they are able to buy it. Yeah, makes sense. So thanks, Shubham. That was a lot of fruitful discussion. A lot of interesting insights came out of it. In the end, with each of this podcast, what I wanted to do is have a takeaway for our listeners in form of a stock or a sector that is looking interesting to you now and why. You don't necessarily have to name the company or stock. Even in directional insights will help. Like people then can figure it out by themselves.
या, so to be very honest, I do not have a very, very strong conviction that it will 100% work out, but I feel these are stocks which have bottomed out. So I do not know if they will actually work out in terms of like how, what will they do. So there are a few cycles which I feel have bottomed out. So for example, the packaging film cycle, right? So packaging films, I talked to a few distributors, and these are, so for example, BOPP films, right?
Yeah,
Uh, they have bottomed out according to me cyclically. They at the peak they used to be at 250 rupees a kg. That is what a distributor told me. And then last 2 years were the one of the worst years in last 20 years of history. That is what he
yeah,
told me. So and now the price bottomed out at 100 rupees a kg. Now it's at 135 rupees a kg. So he was saying that it has bottomed out. So I don't know like how the demand supply will play out, but मतलब downside बहुत limited है. That is what I can say. Uh, so for example, so a lot of these stocks are very, very, uh, uh, or what else do I have? So for example, if you look at camphor cycle, so camphor data
yeah.
is published on
Looking good.
yes, with the inflation data you have on
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
WTI, right? That they publish that data. So camphor, for example, has bottomed out according to me. So all these camphor companies might do okay. Charts are also showing strength according to me.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So there you have it, guys. Some directional thoughts where cycle might turn out. So thank you so much, Shubham, for doing this. Hope that you'll again start your YouTube channel for everyone to benefit from. I think it's been 9, 10 months that you haven't posted, I think, right?
Yes, yes,
Yeah. Okay. So, guys, thank you for listening. I'll put Shubham's YouTube channel and his Twitter profile link in the description. Do follow him. I think you'll get to see a lot of new research that might come out in the near future. So thank you so much, Shubham.